Hi everyone, thank you for having me here. So I'm Yariv, I've been a product manager, managing teams of product and engineering at Google for the last 12 years, and before that 10 years managing engineering mostly in startups. And I really wanted to share my own experience and takeaways from that time about what it takes to what I call innovating at scale, and I'll explain in a second what I mean. And many times when I come and I say I come from Google, I'm going to talk about innovating at scale, people say, oh, you know, Google X, moonshots, flying cars and self-driving airplanes, or the other way around. But actually, no. For two reasons. One, I think there isn't much that a lot of other companies can take from this kind of investments. And I think also the model still yet to prove itself. When I think about Google's DNA and innovation, I actually think about this thing. So Google has a surprisingly large number of products that actually reached more than 1 billion users and still growing. And all of them are operating at extremely competitive landscapes with very big both product and technical challenges. In order to get to that kind of scale and continue growing, you constantly need to innovate. You constantly need to come up with really big ideas that can make a dent at this scale, but you also need to solve very hard engineering problems. And this is what I mean innovating at scale. How can you, over time, sustainably, continue to come up with big product ideas, actually turn them into products in production, and get to these numbers again and again? And I think if there is one slide to be taken from this presentation, it's this one. You cannot, it's very hard, or I think inefficient, to try to force innovation or even to teach innovation. You know, that always helps, but it's really hard. So I'm not a huge believer in innovation workshop or innovation week or innovation experts. I really think it needs to be there all the time and from everywhere. The good thing is actually that there are a lot of people that are innovators already. There are a lot of people that actually want to innovate. They have ideas. They actually thrive in an environment that allows that. So actually getting these people and allowing them to innovate is a much better way. But doing that is not as easy as you might think. Because, like I said, I think innovation is in the DNA, and the DNA, just like in the human body, in the company, it's in every cell. It's how you run the org in many ways. And it's a really ongoing, large investment. And I think there is a lot of aspects that contribute to it, and there is, of course, innovation that isn't just product and engineering innovation. That's my focus here. But I think that, at the end, the three key pillars for innovation at scale is intersection of great people, a mission that matters, and empowering environment. And great people is a little bit, I think, judgmental. It's great people for innovation. Like I said, you know, there are people that are really great in dealing with vagueness. They like to own. They like to lead. They are not afraid to fail. They like to really run on the edge. These are the people that have track record of innovation. Hire these people. And you don't need everything. Actually, it's not great when everyone in the organization, their strength is innovation. I think definitely you want your product leads, and eng leads to be with that trait, but make sure that you are hiring, and also in your performance process, make sure you are supporting that, however you promote and however you give the compensation, because there is a lot of failure associated with innovation. The second thing I will touch in a second, you want a mission that matters. And when I mean a mission that matters, you want a very big mission, so a mission that is big enough to allow a lot of innovation and new ideas that originally you're not thinking. It needs to be exciting, because these are usually people that are driven from excitement, but it needs to be clear, because you don't want crazy people running in all directions. You want these innovations at the end to drive value for the organization. I will touch on that in a second. Most of my talk will be about empowering the environment, because I think the two first points are pretty clear. So empowering environment is exactly what I kind of mentioned before, and this is actually the hard thing where most companies fail. In order to allow innovation, you need an environment that allows idea to come up from everywhere, not just by hierarchy top down. You want data to stream. You want to be able to get feedback. You want to be able to try and so forth, and that actually requires a lot of changes, and this is what I will touch here. Empowering the environment is usually where most companies fail. So just a small point on mission that matters, because I really want this talk to be more practical and not like kind of hand-wavy ideas, but really a bunch of stuff that you feel that you come out, okay, I see how I can implement some of that in my world. And I want to use Google's mission because I think it's awesome. So Google's mission is like organize the world information and make it universally accessible and useful. This was coined in 1998 by two grad students that were hardly 25 years old, and what they built is a new algorithm for a search engine. There is nothing in that vision that talks about algorithms or search engines. They really had the vision to come, we want to organize all the information in the world. So this like clearly a big vision, which is still, Google with all its size hasn't yet solved it. It's definitely exciting, but it's actually clear. And the cool thing is that if you look again at all these products that reached 1 billion users and more, and even other products that are not here, they are all actually inspired by that. Hey, let's get maps data. There is languages that we need to solve. There is a way to serve. There is videos that we need to solve. There is photos that is new data that is not yet organized. So many times, actually, and I will speak a little bit about my own experience in starting stuff at Google, this is a great guiding principle. So I think like as a mission for a company, I think that's a great example of big, exciting, and clear. So now to the main part of my talk. And this is like the 5 points I'm going to discuss in my talk. And very shortly, the first 2 points basically come and say, if you want to do really big, amazing ideas that a lot of people use, these are not going to come from genius product managers, enlightened CEOs, or whoever. These are going to come from your own users. You just need to know how to listen to them. So this is like one thing, what do you do to actually get that feedback as efficiently and as quickly as possible? The other 3 points is, again, innovation that comes from within the org many times doesn't come from the product managers or the managers or even the engineers. It comes from everywhere. Usually it comes from people that know the situation best. And these are actually the most junior engineers that are actually close to the code and know the problems and know what it can do or can't do. A lot of time people in customer support and other functions that actually leave the market every day, you need to create the environment that there is somehow they understand what the company does and there is a way for the company to get their voice in. So that's all my talk. And I want to start with the first line, and again, focus on the user. Everyone says that, okay, what does that mean? And again, this is my interpretation. And I don't think there is, just like I said the first slide, I don't think there is a single way of innovation. There isn't like Google's principles to innovation. I think innovation across Google and many companies is done in many different ways. This is my interpretation. I've shared it with many people, so it's not only mine. I think there is an agreement within product org, but again, right, I think like it's kind of directional. It's not the answer. So I think, again, the first 2 points are almost trivial. I will mostly focus on the third one, right? So one thing, which sounds maybe stupid, but most companies actually do that, focus on users, not on competition. And a lot of companies actually focus on the competition, copy from the competition, follow the competition. And it could be a good strategy for some stuff, but if you're trying to innovate and come up with a new disruptive idea and do something that will change the market, this is not the way. All right? So always ask yourself, wait, am I copying the competition or am I listening to the users? And surprising enough, the other one happens more often than the first one, just easier. The other one is focusing on users' problem, not your own. And this is another thing that I've learned the hard way, how frequently companies do that. That, people in emerging markets don't have access to information. Don't they? Or maybe they're accessing it in a different way. They're happy with it. They're just not using the same way that they do it in other places via your channel, and you have a problem. Or, Google famous efforts to go into social and to go into a chat space. Is that a Google problem that they want to operate in a certain market, or is that a user problem? And I think it's fine. Like both problems are legit. It's fine to say some market is strategic for the company. We want to be there, come a way to get there, although it's saturated. And I think in some ways, and we did that. But then you need to ask yourself, what is the real user problem over there that we're solving differently? Because if you only try to focus your own problem, it's like selling hamburgers for 90% reduction to vegetarians. It will not work. And then the third one, which I think is key, more nuanced, and a lot of people miss, and especially actually smaller entrepreneurs and smaller companies. Is focus and own the problem, not the solution. And I'll speak about that because it's unclear, you know, it's like, again, this kind of Chinese fortune cookie statements. But a lot of us, like, you know, we get in love with the solution. If you're an engineer, why? It's so intuitive, in genuinely like genius solution. If you're a product or designer, the design is so slick. But users don't care. Users are not using your product, definitely not sustainably because it's slick or it's a genius in technical invention. They use it if you solve the problem. So this is like one thing. Don't fall in love with the details of your solution. Moreover, as I will demo in a second, the problem is that usually the chances of you really understanding a problem and what causes it, a big problem that is worthwhile building for, from the outside, before you really interact with it, are small. Usually you will find out that what you thought was the problem is actually, you know, the surface, there is an underlying problem, what you built doesn't work or doesn't work for everyone. So if you're focused on your solution, making better and better, and you're losing actually the real problem, you know, our users actually, you solve the original problem, you will not get to that innovating at scale. And just let me take an example, and again, I chose Google search because this is something, everyone is an expert on Google search. And everyone used it, and we all used it daily, for 20 years now. And I think like it's a really cool example because again, yeah, Google search started with a change in the ranking algorithm. So basically, if you still remember, I remember unfortunately, search engines use kind to count words, and you will get the page results, and you would need to look for the most relevant page, which was very hard. Larry and Sergey came with a different idea how to get the best results in the top, on the top, and it felt like magic for a second, right? And they actually solved it definitely compared to competition. But this was not the problem. The problem was, hey, users wanted access to information. And that thing helped, but that did not solve the problem. The first thing they noticed is that actually users don't know how to spell. So yes, if you would spell right, we will get the right result. But if you don't spell right, you don't get the right result. It wasn't what we wanted to do, but that's the user problem. Okay, let's do spell checker. Let's do did you mean? Let's go over that. Okay, so fix that. And then they found out that people are not sure how to form the queries. People started learning how to speak queries. Even until today, people try to reverse engineer how to form a query. Even today, we hadn't solved it. But then if you remember, we launched suggest. So you start typing, and we kind of show you what queries we think are good based on what we think you're actually trying to answer. Again, not the problem. Right? Language became a problem. Because there were you didn't know the query language or the page wasn't available. Okay, so we said, okay, translate or generate a content. And then we figured out that users actually want content that doesn't exist. They wanted news, they wanted images, they wanted maps, they wanted all of that stuff that we couldn't index and find. So we said, okay, we need to actually generate that to create new verticals. None of that was in the original plan, but all of that reflected in really one, owning the problem, and two, really looking at what users are doing. How did we know all of that, right? So for example, the web is slow. We figured out that if it takes more than half a millisecond, users tend to bounce away and not wait for it. So you really need to listen to users. And the way Google approached it in a scalable way was using logs. So really query logs and session logs, and really look at very large number and very deep analysis on really, okay, what's happening? When are we seeing users in a good session versus a bad session? And all these things emerge, and more things are still emerging, right? You know, people stopped using desktop, they started searching on mobile, so we need to do from mobile, but mobile UI is very different. And again, you need to follow the problem. And I think that's an excellent example. And the investment that Google did to actually be able to log all of these billion queries every second, to analyze it, to have the appropriate talent of statisticians and other people that can actually make the right decisions here, to have the right infrastructure for testing and running stuff. These are huge investments. You cannot decide to do all of that if you don't a priori decide, I'm going to listen to my users, I'm going to do it at scale, I'm going to do it in an analytical way, and I'm going to use it. Like the whole organization is built around owning that problem, getting the information, driving it. The way we review products, all is around that. And I think, honestly, that's like, one of the most important points. The second point that is very closely related is launch and iterate. So basically move as quickly as you can, because if your innovation depends on ideas and insights from users, you want that insights as early as possible. You don't want to wait and build this whole spaceship just to figure out that they wanted completely something else. It's just ineffective. So this is basically a scientific description of our launch process. So the first one is what we call fish food. So this is basically the team themselves that are developing as early as possible that the thing even little bit works, the product works, we are already using it ourselves, just to see that the assumptions are right, that it doesn't really break. The number one rule for any product manager and engineering manager, if you yourself are not using your product, no one will. Because you understand how it works, you don't have discoverability problems, you are not tainted by competition, like you are set for success to use that product. If you don't find it useful, engaging, and retention, nobody will. So very early on, we start with that. Then once it's a little bit stable and the main functionality in, it's like, the MMVP, the minimal viable product is there, we do team food. This is like kind of friends and family within the organization. So this could be hundreds or a few thousands of people that will use your product. So these are people that are close enough to actually understand, and you can say, this is working or not working for certain reasons, but they are detached and they are very happy to call out your issues. All right, so this actually will go for months, and you'll get like, very issues, this doesn't work, doesn't solve, edge cases, and so forth. Once we feel that we solved that one, and it's a good experience for people to understand, we go into dog food. Dog food is the entirety of Google. This is 100 and something thousand people. Not necessarily tech, most of them sales and other stuff. They still have, advantages over normal users, like I said, discoverability and so forth. This is where privacy, security, usability, and these kinds of issues surface up. And these three are like a very horrible and painful process. Like, there is this mirror that usually shows how ugly you are or your baby is, that is in your face at your workplace, which kind of you get your performance management, and clearly you're giving them a product that is not yet ready. But especially at Google, where there is a target on our back that we launch, it's much better to get all that feedback within your organization than on the New York Times. So I think, again, Google is a big org and so forth, but I think this works at any org. Like, really, your users are the people sitting next to you, and that's like super valuable. And most of the P0 and P1 bugs, even P2 and P3, are actually found in that process. Also, it forces you to boot that infrastructure. How am I measuring success? How am I measuring quality? How am I measuring engagement? Do I have that pieces to measure that in the product? How do I improve it? Like, all of that infrastructure that will then serve you at scale is already tested, because otherwise you understand that you're blind. And then before we launch a spaceship, usually, and Google sometimes is scrutinized for that, but by design, many times we go out with a product that we know that isn't perfect yet, that we know that isn't completely flashed. And I think we have matured in some senses, and we start putting beta everywhere. But the basic idea is that we think it drives significant value. Yes, it can be improved, but we really want that input at scale. We really want to put it out there. We really want to understand, are users engaging? If not, why? What happened to failures? What are users saying? And this is our way, really, to get that feedback. But again, the criticality, there is no point on putting all of that if you are not listening to that feedback and acting on it. So this is kind of the front of the shop. In the back, there is a lot of data that needs to come in, and you need to know how to act on it. So really, that's critical. And then a lot of people tell me, yeah, sure, Google is a web company. You have this website. You put it on. It's so easy to do that for a website. But we are a hardware company, or we work with the enterprise clients. It's so much harder. So I actually like this example that I want to talk about. So we had a few engineers a few years ago that had this idea to do this VR set, and they said all the VR sets require special hardware and stuff. We actually think that we can do it with a simple phone and just, play a little bit on the phone. But they wanted to iterate. How do you do that? There are so many hard design, and manufacturing takes so much, and they just wanted to see whether it can actually create a good experience using a phone on VR. So they came with this genius idea of building it from cardboard. All right, so actually it cost $20, the whole design process and stuff, and it was a few 20%. 20% is a bunch of people that on top of our job, we can spend 20% of whatever we want. So a bunch of 20%ers in 8 weeks managed to create this thing, and it was actually launched like that in Google I/O event. It was given to people, people used it, we got a bunch of feedback. The year after, we launched Daydream. Learning all the lessons from that, and really showing how you can actually launch, iterate, go quickly, get stuff, and really build a good product, also in the hardware world. And then we said, that's cool. And then you started seeing cardboards all over Google hardware. So I started the assistant project, and then we said, okay, we want to give builders some kit. But, again, we want to do quickly and see an early adopters. So I think we beat their $20. I think, it's less than $10. We said, okay, some very simple Raspberry Pi, a bunch of wires, a cardboard, you put it, and then actually you've seen amazing innovations on that, and exactly the gaps in the API, SDK, and so forth, surfaced really well. So I think when you have it in the DNA, and we're really thinking and understand the importance, you can actually do it in creative ways, even in hardware. So these were my first 2 points. Basically, really be focused on the user, be focused on the problem, and have that information coming in. If you actually listen very well to the problems of your users, you will succeed. Like Google Search, which I think is one of the best products ever built, still is fulfilling on the early promise and still is investing heavily in actually making that information accessible and useful. So I think this is again, key takeaway from my 12 years over there. The next section of the talk is about the organization. Like I said, ideas come from everywhere, from unexpected places. So you need just, again, assuming you hired people that are innovative, you just need to allow the flow to happen. And the best way not to allow the flow is to build an hierarchical organization, that there is one head on the top that barks order, then there is 1,000 hands and legs that they run around and do it. The chances that one head is enlightened with all the ideas are pretty small. And usually, the higher you are, the more disconnected from details you are. You have maybe better view on some stuff. So the approach that Google took, and I actually really appreciate it, is again simple. I always like the things that are simple to understand and super hard to do, like playing Go, I don't know. And this is one of them. And this is basically just share everything. The key thing is you want to have people access to data. If you want people at lower levels to innovate and come with ideas, the people that see customers' pain and people that see where the product is broken, they need to understand, wait, what is the strategy of the company? What does the company care about? What are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to maximize money? Are we trying to get to new markets? Are we going to get to new area? Are we trying to get to new users? What is it that the company cares about? And am I connected into that? What is that other orgs are building? Am I duplicating an existing effort? Can I actually combine with someone else to make a bigger thing? Can I actually solve problems for others? Can someone else solve some of my problems, right? And then there is, of course, ability to teams to work together, right? And in order for that, you need a lot of transparency in the organization, both on the strategic high-level stuff, but also access to documents, to code, to designs, to presentations, so you know what's going on. And you can easily find stuff if you're looking for, whether it's code, decks, people, teams, and so forth. And I think you cannot fake it. Like if you take people to share, but you do not share with them as a company, it's like, raising children and telling them not to eat sugar when your mouth is full of chocolate. Try that, doesn't work. So the first thing that I think is very cool in Google culture is this, every week there is this, thank God it's Friday. It used to be on Friday, then they realized that there is Australia, so now it's on Thursdays. And for years now you see mostly Sundar, but until recently you had Larry and Sergey and all of the company executives on stage answering live questions, explain what we're doing, where we're going, teams presenting stuff. That joker on the side is the company CFO, really sharing the most sensitive information. Of course, there's a lot of problems. There are sometimes leaks and stuff that is very sensitive from product and strategy. Eric Schmidt, every quarter, presents what he presented to the board of directors. So really, not just the value of sharing, but it shows and demonstrates how much we appreciate and think the importance of sharing, and it goes down. Another example, which I think now is more common in many companies, is that very easy to find people, everything, all the people are over there with the role, with the resumes, with what they're working on, the bugs they're solving, like all that information, so it's very easy to find people around and to link it to the work they're doing, again, for execution transparency. And the cool thing then, once it's become part of your culture and NDA, it goes elsewhere. So this is, for example, every year there is what we call Google Guys that you actually measure all the managers are rated by 200 different, it's like, your very detailed report card, and it's public. You can look at the report card from Sundar to every manager in the org, because it's one, and because people believe, okay, that's the way to improve on that area. And I think that's also innovation, both in transparency, but also in measurability that I will touch afterwards. So I think, again, many people say it and kind of saying, okay, yeah, that's straightforward, why are you on a stage saying that? But there is a price to it, definitely at the higher level. There is some discomfort, especially if what you're sharing is not perfect, but there is no other way to allow innovation. If you are going to block the data channels in your organization, you're just killing innovations without even knowing it. Almost the last point is data, not opinion. And I think this is like one of the things that Google is most famous of. So what is the currency of decision making in your organization? And again, unfortunately, definitely in traditional companies, the currency is hierarchy, right? So like, the most senior person in the room, his opinion counts. This is what everyone does, regardless, if it's right or wrong. In other more, I would say, progressive companies, usually it's the person that talks the loudest, right? So someone is, convincing, okay. I guess, the people that didn't agree were afraid to discuss, okay. That's the opinion, that's how it works. Again, opinions and maybe presentation skills. But that kind of, again, shuts down innovation. Because again, innovation many times actually come from quiet people, definitely in the engineering world. They're not necessarily outspoken. Many of them are juniors, they're not even in these forums. How can you allow these opinions to surface and have a chance against these loud senior people? And the idea is data. If you make data your decision-making currency, then suddenly everything opens up. It doesn't matter who brings it. It doesn't matter who says it. All you come and say, hey, I think we should do X, and here's the data to support it. And you cannot argue with it. And if some exec or someone asks, actually it's in the DNA, wait, what's the data that supports that? It's nice that you have an opinion, and it's great, but what supports that data? Where is the supportive data? And as I will show in a second, the other power of data is we have a lot of anchoring and biasing and beliefs that a thing can be only done in one way. And it's very hard to convince by arguing because we're psychologically or we're bought in, we invested. But when data is objective-ish, but definitely much more objective than arguments. All right, so this is a very famous or infamous story. At the time, Marissa Myers, who was like the goddess of data on UI, she did an experiment in Google on the blue G with 41 shades of blue to see which one actually results in the best interaction. And there was a big debate, is that really, significant? And of course you can see if it's significant, but should we apply it also to design? But it doesn't matter. I think the key thing it matters is that even for such a decision, the approach was, okay, let's test it. But underlying that, if you want to be able to run an experiment that tests 41 shades of blue on your homepage that serves billions of queries per second, and you want to do it in a statistically viable way and have, actually control groups that you actually can measure, and you want to have the people that can say yes or no, that's a lot of underlying investment. You cannot one day say, I want to start to be data-driven. If you believe in that principle, and I think you should believe, you need to come back to the organization and say, oh, what do we do that in a year or 2 years from now, we can really be data-driven in decisions? Because the one thing you don't want to do is and to say, I want to be data-driven, but then it takes you 12 months to get a decision. That's not great, right? You need to have actually an efficient way. And when I say data, it doesn't necessarily need to be like that, right? Like we start sometimes when I have an early product, I go and ask 10 people. And then maybe I do a simple mock and I show it to 40 people. And then maybe afterwards I do. So we're not like completely undermining qualitative feedback in any way. But we are very much, once you're data-driven and think about it, like, qualitative versus quantitative, causal versus correlation, all these questions, always there, and you're asking the right question. Again, it becomes in a DNA and drives the decision in a much better way. And the cool thing is you can see it actually in practice, right? So for example, Chrome at the time came and said, hey, we actually think that the browser needs to completely reinvent it. And I don't know how many of you remember, but browsers were like, 200 toolbars and a little bit of space to do something. And they said, no, actually, we should clean it all out. Actually, speed and security is the thing that needs to be the key features, and a bunch of other stuff that today, is true. But the way they proved it is a bunch of experiments and showing data and showing engagement. Chrome OS was the same thing, coming and looking what people are actually doing on these laptops and figuring out, you actually don't need an OS for a lot of use cases. Like if you actually use the browser as the OS, for many people, that's enough, given what's already on the web, and you can simplify it, can be faster, you don't need all the account management, and so forth. But this went actually to a lot of other stuff, right? So for example, if you have been in any data center ever in your life, when I say data center, the Pavlovian the response is cold, right? These things are frozen. Like even if you go to these tiny server rooms, you go in and you find an iceman inside. Now imagine, millions and stuff. And of course, this is like extremely expensive to do, and like it consumes half of the US economy. And then someone actually came and said, I think that we can do it at room temperature. And then recently, actually, someone else came and said, actually, I think that with machine learning, with reinforcement learning, we can manage it better than people. And these are like crazy ideas, but once you come and say, okay, here is the data that we're going to test it, here's the plan how to test it, here's the success criteria and decision making, execs feel very comfortable of saying, okay, run that experiment, show me, compare, and let's allow that, right? So all these, like, Android is another example, there are many examples of what we did over there, but this is what, again, allows people to come and say the way that everyone thinks is true is right, is actually not the best way. There is a very different way, and through data, I can set up an experiment and metrics and prove to you, and beforehand say, here's my success criteria, that actually a new disruptive way can work. And if you're in a culture that doesn't have that, it's really hard, because there is a lot of risk associated. If there is no way to measure and you don't know how to make the discussions, usually there is some exec that is bought into freezing data centers, and you have no chance. And then again, the cool thing is once it's done in engineering, product, hardware, and so forth, it goes to other places, right? So like Google HR now is actually, they said, we also want to do people analytics. We also want to measure. We also want to have data drive decisions. So they did a bunch of very interesting, really statistical viable learnings of what makes a good team, what makes a good manager. They actually reported it and published it outside, and coming actually with very interesting insights on what makes a team more effective and so forth. That is all data-based and data-driven, which again, you need to be careful, not only data, there's clearly, but I think this is where people mostly wrong and where innovation hits the wall. Finally, my last point, which connects again, you don't need to teach people innovation. There is a lot of crazy people out there that even go and do their own companies and startups and mortgage their heart. Like, some people are so driven. Just allow them to be driven, right? And many times, like, what Eric Schmidt is saying, it's very rare that Google as a company, was innovative and came up with genius idea. It was like, small people that were passionate about something. They believe they can make a real big difference and come with something. They did it, and it propagated up and became a big thing. And basically, the key thing is create the environment where those who want to innovate can, and those who want to join them can. And actually, I think the last part of the sentence is actually the critical one. It's not about, once you hired people who want to innovate, they will innovate no matter what. They don't need the 20%. They will do 120 or 200%. These people will run and try. They cannot resist taking an idea and just making it happen. That's not your worry. But the problem is that these people cannot do it on their own. They need resources. They need machines. They need expertise of others. They need UX designers. They need lawyers. They need additional engineers. You need to somehow allow them access to these resources of the company. And I think that this 20% time that people can work on other stuff is less for the innovators, but actually for them to be able to build a temporary ad hoc team. And this is critical. So a lot of us have been building products. We have used the company resources. We used server time, whatever resources were available, and the company made that available. And that's critical, because there is so much a lonely entrepreneur can do by themselves. You need to provide a system that they get everything they need. And also, the first and last point, one, freedom to take risk. Make risk-taking and the expectancy of risk-taking positive. So make sure that no one is fired for taking risks, and make sure that people are rewarded when the risks make sense. And risk makes sense is also when it failed. But this is clearly, make it that I'm not concerned. If I have a good idea and I want to pursue it, I'm not worried. I know the expectancy of the ROI of taking that risk is positive. I can only gain from it. And last, allow internal mobility. Don't hog on your people. Let people move. Let people start new stuff. It's much better that they do it inside than outside. And if you look, some of the most famous products that we have are actually a result of 20%. There's not many people know. Google News, Google Translate, Gmail, all started with people that were 20%, as this was not top-down. So Gmail, someone noticed that most of the time, our machines are actually using all the CPU, using a lot of the network, using memory, but the disk is empty. So we just have a lot of empty disk. What can we do with it? And they said, let's give free storage. It doesn't cost us anything. It's valuable. So if you remember, when Gmail went out, all the other providers provided you 2-3 megs you constantly manage, and this was suddenly infinite. Google Translate, same thing. Some guy had an idea on how to do automated translation and use. And some people say, this is 2003, 2004, different Google, different times. There was, what can a single person, both internally and externally, do? So this is a little bit of my story. And what you see here is Sundar, CEO of Google, in 4 different Google I/O keynotes. So here on the left is Sundar announcing the Google Assistant in 2016. This is 2017, Sundar announcing Google Lens. So basically, it's the ability to open a camera and understand, get information about it, kind of browsing the world. 2018, Sundar announcing what we call Google Duplex. So actually, Google can make a phone just like a human to a restaurant and whatnot. Very cool demo. You can look it out. It actually speaks. It can set an appointment or reserve a place. And this is this year, Duplex on the web, where we actually self-run a browser. Where basically we're able to run ourselves like a self-playing piano. So if you want to buy some tickets, we can do it for you. You don't need to type, and we can do stuff in the background. So it's a very cool automated machine. 3 of these are my team. So 2 of us were in a room and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we can speak to something, speak back? It has personality, I think. Let's put 5 strong people. Let's make it 20. Let's show it to someone. Got company excited. Google Lens, we said, okay, that's cool that we built this thing that it can hear and speak, but wouldn't it be cool if it can also see? What does it mean to build eyes for it? And we said, okay, let's just kind of have it access to full camera and see what it understands and come up. This is a sister team. That's a cool idea. But then we came, okay, if I had a robot, if I want to have something that can really help me in the real world, if I had a robot that all that robot can do is actually browse a browser, that robot would be extremely useful. Can we actually build that? Something that browses the browser without any change in websites. And basically, this is the kind of level of insights that we started the project. And then we kind of, okay, what is success criteria? What is a prototype? What is the things that we really need to improve? And all of these have become really Google strategy, launch products that are still very early in their life. They are not solving the problem as they should. They're very basics. I think they're kind of bleeding edge kind of products. But to me, this is kind of the implementation of innovating at scale, year after year, really crazy, big ideas, but learning how to dream big and doing it small. So this is the end of my presentation. So just really, what I was saying is like 1 and 2, focus on your users, really build everything that needs to be done to be able to get them into that feedback loop and focus on the problem. If you focus on the problem for 20 years, you have job security and you will have a good advantage in the market, because this is where good product ideas come from. And really manage your company in a way that people who want to innovate join your company and they can successfully innovate, and the company gives them the resources to encourage it and grow it and scale it at the right moment. Thank you very, very much. I hope it helped. Thanks.
A few minutes. So we have a few minutes. So I want to open the floor to some questions or some comments, and maybe we can just engage in a very short discussion here with Yariv before we move on to the next speaker. Does anyone want to take a question? Dimitris? Yes?
Hi.
Hi.
You talked about a fail-safe environment. So can you share some practices or techniques that make failure allowed and useful?
So I think one is the insight that most of our industry is failing. Like if I think of all the projects that I've seen and I compare what was the original goal and where they ended up, even the successful ones usually are 1/10 from the initial goal. I think just understanding that this is the type of industry, for the good or worse, that we're in it. I think one key, so there are different elements. One is really realize that you put your best people on the hardest problems. And know from the beginning that there is a chance that it will fail. And I think like one is knowing how to fail. So we have, I think, 2 good principles for failing. One is fail early, fail fast. And that means that when you begin, you come and say, okay, here are the milestones that I'm setting now, because it's very easy to almost, like kind of put milestones. It's always fine to move them. They're not like, made in stone. But what are, like, for example, what are the feasibility questions? So many times, is this possible at all? Technically, will users use it? Will the ecosystem accept it? Can we do that at scale? These are like 4 questions that I often have in different products. And then I say, okay, how do I prove that early on and check this as fast as I can? And so this is like, 1. 2, there is a very healthy culture of postmortems, of learning from other failures. But 3, really understanding that you cannot succeed big without failing. No one, unless you are irresponsible or, unprofessionally, like if you failed for the wrong reasons, yeah, you can be, we don't want this type of people. But I've seen many people receive bonuses and promoted for having a great failure. I've never seen anyone that hit the problem because they failed, and that's like, innovation is a part of the things that innovation and execution and leadership and initiative is the attributes that we look at. And we are looking, of course, at impact, but when we are, now we're going through performance. When I judge my people, there is the what and the how is as important as the what. It's great if you have impact, of course, but also if you demonstrate certain stuff, that also counts and you can get for that.
Okay, we have one here.
Hello, thank you for the speech. It was very interesting. You talked about internal mobility, in other words, rotation. In all companies, there are several repetitive things to do, operation-wise or support teams, and of course the projects, the high-profile projects, all the innovative ones. So what are the criteria that allow or disallow internal mobility in Google for the people? Because most of us, all of us, they have a tendency to look for the something new, the something sexy, the something techy, and try to get away from the repetition and the routine. So what are the criteria? How do you tackle this?
So, funny enough, actually, I found that I see more people doing 10 years the same thing other than people that jump. After you jump 1, 2, or 3 times, you realize that actually it's very hard to jump and succeed in an organization. So even in an organization, I think we think that. Although I do tell always people that the shiny new thing is very hard and frustrating and slow. And so I'll tell you the type of mobility. One, there is a general culture that if people want to, we encourage people to move every 2 years. We actually encourage. We think it's good to spread knowledge, to see different ways of doing, to make you again stretch yourself. We know that like actually getting into a comfort zone is not good for anyone. So this is on the formal level. But there is also a lot of informal ways that to do. So for example, a lot of my team are what I call rotators. So this is a person that was actually in customer support or program manager, you know, and he has an idea or he seems to be good. And this is just an agreement between me and the manager. No approval. That manager loses a person for 6 or 9 months. But anyhow, that person would leave or whatnot, and that person maybe so, and that happened like multiple times. This 20% is another one. But really the general to encourage and really have managers. Like if you are a manager and we know that you're trying to keep your people, that reflects really bad on you. If anyone says, or you're like, yeah, like, I think it's a lot of it is in the culture, and then there is a lot of informal. But I actually do think that getting people to move is harder than you say. And I actually always try to scare people when they come. I tell them, hey, you know, this is hard and not easy. But
yeah, we humans do tend to go towards safety. So that's.
Hi. So you mentioned about 20% innovation, right? I mean, you utilize your time 20% to do innovation. I was wondering, I mean, there are several things running in the background. You're doing a lot of stuff. You've been working on really, important products of Google. How did you manage to utilize that time to keep the pace, right? And I mean, pragmatically speaking, you and your team, how did you manage to do it?
so, again, I think the 20% one, and again, to his points, most people don't utilize 20%. Actually, very few people actually use it, and I think at the moment it's like completely informal. So just like and again, I think like the way I use 20% is when some of my ideas, and I needed 10 engineers, and I did not have any formal headcount, I went out and sold out and say, hey, I have this cool thing, if you want to be part of it, come and join on 20%. So like, that's how I used it. I think this is applies like regardless of 20%, because you want to innovate regardless and you want to build constant stuff. I think this is like just like how do you manage and focus, and there is so much stuff to be done, and like really being diligent on understanding that it's better to do a good job on 1 or 2 things rather than do a half-assed job on 5 or 6 things. So the way we make sure we do that is we are very metrics driven in terms of goals. So as I plan now 2020, or as I plan quarterly, I come and say, okay, where do I want to be in terms of metrics? What are the metrics? I want to have so and so many users interacting with that with so many engagement. Okay, now from that, what do I need to deliver that drives that? And then I just like look at the set of things that I can do. And what I have learned is like, you can put a bunch of stuff on tricks sheet, it will compile on the tricks sheet, but it's pointless. If like it doesn't align with what people can actually do, it doesn't work. So I think like, that's one level management. The other thing that I've learned the hard way is that many failures are not really failures, but it's actually unrealistic goals that were set by executives that did not really understand the problem and the difficulty. And then you set this ridiculous goal before knowing. After 3 months, you figure out, hey, that goal is completely impossible and senseless. Everyone is afraid to say no. They're actually running blindly towards that. And of course, they are set to fail, not because of any problem. And I think one of the things that as a manager is to be able to go back and say, our current goal makes 0 sense. This is what really needs to be done in the orchestra. But again, I think like, the big thing is prioritize. And in our case, focus on big impact. Like at the end, we look, okay, what is like the big impact? And then the impact drives requirements that drive innovation. I hope I answered.
Yariv, thank you so much.
Thank
Everybody, big round of applause for Yariv. What an awesome talk.